All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed, your go-to destination for insightful discussions on talent acquisition and sourcing in the government contracting space. Today, you have me, co-host Junius Currier, director of sourcing for Maximus, and then Jennifer Jones, uh, sourcing lead at Mantech, and Justen Baxter, manager of sourcing at Serco. And today we have a special guest for everyone. We have Sarah Stull. She has joined us today. She is the senior director of security at Maximus. And a little bit about Sarah. She is a distinguished security professional and a certified facility security officer with over 17 years, or actually over 19 years of experience in all phases of business management. Again, I mentioned she currently serves as the senior director of security at Maximus, and she comes with a wealth of experience in the government contracting space. So, over her career, Sarah has held several critical roles, including the VP of Security, as well as Director of Security at Advantage Federal and the Director of Security at SOS International. So, please welcome Sarah to our podcast today, where we're going to talk about security in the cleared sector and the intersection with talent acquisition. So, without further ado, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I know that I kind of just jumped in and introduced you. Do you mind just kind of taking a few moments just to kind of walk us through like kind of your career journey and how your roles have kind of evolved within the security domain within government contracting?
Sure, absolutely. So, as you stated, started out over about 19 years ago in the profession. Before I jumped into security, I was in an HR role. So, with that, sliding into security, it had similar type framework to follow for that. I really started out as an assistant in the security department at one of the larger defense contractors in the DC area. And I walked around with my notebook for many years, asking lots of questions to kind of understand what was going on. Um, Really getting into the security world and in some of my first few positions, it was a lot of processing. It was a lot of personnel aspect to the programs. But with that, it was that partnership with talent acquisition from day one. So really within those roles, and this was back in the time frame when people used to come in person to interview, and you had a one-on-one. And so myself and my security team at the time, we would meet with the candidates as they were in there meeting with the recruiters and meeting with the hiring managers and having that security discussion in person and really having the opportunity, I think, to talk about a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today with the candidates, which started that relationship for that individual with the organization, with my team, with us as they were going to go through the security journey and then join the organization for the position if they were going to get hired for. So that was really an exciting part. I started out both on DoD, Intel, and pretty much all the agencies across the board. So I was able to experience all those different processes from the start. I wasn't stovepipe into one agency or one particular thing, which was great. And I learned later on that I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. Several years into my career, my leadership said, "Hey, how about writing security volumes for proposals? You excited about that?" And I said, "Ooh, okay, sure. It sounds really great." So what that really entailed is I got punished and put into a skiff to write the classified proposals for weeks at a time, or in a room with other folks developing our solutions. And what that did is really bring the perspective of security into the entire business and the organization to understand our role in BD and capture and all of these programs were so important for the success of the business. And if we did not get ourselves involved early, then transitions wouldn't go smoothly. We couldn't bring in candidates. It made for a horrible experience for folks coming into the organization. So with that, it really transformed and excited me to say, okay, well, this is great. I've had enough time writing the proposals in the skiff. What's next? And as I moved into more leadership positions, really then working with all the stakeholders within the companies. So, as I transitioned, and I've been with small businesses, I've been with large, I've been with companies that have been acquired. I've been on the other side of acquiring companies. So really with all of that, understanding all the nuances and with that, But going back to that with growing within leadership, really that participation with my other partners within the company. A lot of what we do ties with legal, ties with compliance, ties with HR, ties with our security team and our recruiting team. And without that partnership, we can't be successful in delivering that client success and the success for the employees we bring into the company. So that's kind of a transition of where I am today. I've been really fortunate to work for great leadership, great owners who have inspired me, who have moved me along in my career, who have pushed me. One of the first early on leaders that I remember is Dr. John Gannon, who was believe his formal title was Assistant Director of Analysis and Production for the agency. He was my general manager back when I was at BAE, and he really got me involved with every aspect of what they were doing within his business unit. And he was a leader that I admired, and all of what I learned from him took with me for the rest of my career. And I was, again, very fortunate for that. So brings me to where I'm at today. I'm with Maximus Federal. We are a growing organization. I'm lucky enough to have a great team underneath me that helps support all the contracts and agencies that we have to date.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Sarah.
that's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
So what are some things that we can do as talent acquisition professionals to guide our candidates? What are some documents that they should have ready to expedite the process whenever they move into starting that clearance process?
That's such a great question. And it's one of the things I like to talk about the most, especially, with folks who haven't been cleared before, or it's new to them, or they're going for an upgrade. When I first started out, there wasn't a lot of resources publicly available that we could give employees. We had the old school brochures or pamphlets or pages that we printed off. But there's not what there is online, like there is online today. I think the best piece of advice is, if you want to get cleared, go out and Google the SF-86 and start to work through it. Start to see the types of information that's going to be requested of you if you go for that security clearance, and start to put it together. That's really important because it does take a lot of time, especially if you've lived multiple places. The other thing too is to run your own credit report. Run a check on yourself. Fix before you go through the clearance process. Have answers to, so you can mitigate any potential risk that's there, or be really forthcoming with the information that you're going to put on your form, so you don't run into any hiccups. DCSA has a great website that says obtaining and maintaining your security clearance. It's a resource tool that they have out there that really goes into the process, I think, in a digestible manner for anybody that wants to know. So I would say, do those things for the candidates. Also get them in touch with your security team. Well, we've got lots of things going on. One thing we do love to have is that discussion with candidates, so they feel comfortable about what they're going to do, and we can point them in the directions of those resources as well.
Perfect. Can you dive into maybe some things that candidates can do as far as social media cleanup? I know that that's been an issue previously in the past that I've seen.
Yeah, so social media is part of an investigation. It's publicly available information on yourself. So, what you have out there can be found, right? So one thing that we found is kind of something that's popped up along the way with social media is foreign contacts, right? So if you are one to accept anybody who wants to be your friend, or, however you connect on all the other platforms, right? If you accept everybody without understanding who they are, they have access to a lot of information about you. And what some of our government agencies are now doing is saying, well, you befriend them on social media, so they are now a close and continuous contact. That's someone you need to report. When in all actuality, it may not be somebody that you know. So my suggestion is go through, see who you're connected with, ensure that you don't have any associations that aren't ones that you don't want. Really validate the information that you have publicly available.
So I have a question that it's kind of and first I just want to say, Sarah, I understand the immense pressure you're under in your role from every attack vector right now, from our adversaries, right? So in terms of, and this stems into OPSEC, especially with the generational shift within our industry. What can we do as talent acquisition professionals to help the cause for those within our industry, civilian and not, if we find them maybe on social media through, it could be a spouse, divulging information or other things of that nature? What can we do to help give back to serve that community, to help you as maybe a proxy and an arm to help people within our community, DODIC, as recruiters, as sourcers, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is there certain areas that you want us to maybe do more?
Yeah, so I think it's our role as folks in this industry to be part of the security team, right? We are aware enough to know what our adversaries are doing. We are aware enough to know that there's threats and risks, and with that comes a responsibility to inform individuals. So what I would suggest is, we never want to put ourselves in a position where we're delivering information or we're becoming someone that could become a risk to ourselves or our organization. What I mean by that is we're not lawyers, right? We're not there to give counsel. We're not there to give, all of that information. But what we can do is give guidance and remind individuals that information they put out there, that information other individuals could be putting out there about them, is again publicly available, and it can be used in certain situations, especially if they're cleared. So you want to ensure that you're protecting yourself with your associations with the information and what's going on. I think it's our responsibility to remind them of that and to show them that there's resources within their current company or within, whatever agency that they're associated with that can give them more specific guidance on that as it pertains to the federal regulations and the directives that are out there. I think when it comes to the things that talent acquisition may deal with on a regular basis, resumes, profiles on LinkedIn, things like that, we can remind them that we don't need to know your specific project name or your code name used for that, right? Like, one thing that I used to do is I used to review all the resumes at one of my positions for our internal employees to ensure that they're not putting too much out there, but it was a resume well enough that they could move within the organization where folks would know what they were doing. So I think that's another bit that we can tell them, that us knowledgeable enough about the profession know that if you state you have a U.S. granted government security clearance, well, then we know what the next step is to get more specifics on that. But that's the key word that links us in on you. You don't have to go into the specifics as to what that is. So those are things that we can have those conversations with and remind individuals of.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. And I think I know myself and my staff try to do that, but I think we, especially in certain times, I think we need to be probably more aggressive than normal. So
Yeah, absolutely. And what I tell my recruiting team is, if you get a resume that's suspicious or you get information that's too much out there, give it to my team and we can take it to government channels. We can send it to our counterintelligence rep and say, hey, it's a little concerning to us. We just wanted to bring it to your attention. So we do have avenues that we can use as security professionals to help if it's something of that extreme of a nature where it's, wow, we really want to get this off the web, right? Like, this isn't something that should be out there.
Yeah. And this may be, this is probably more for us with OSINT backgrounds like Junius and I and Jen, because not every recruiter is going to have that type of background. But if you see connections that could be nefarious, or it could be a potential sock puppet, as we call it in the IC, that is connecting with individuals and is not who they say they are, bring that to the attention of that candidate. That so-and-so seems like a suspicious profile. I notice they're connected to you. It could be through LinkedIn or another channel, because that's happening quite a bit. And that's more of me just voicing that as, just heads up. It's happening.
And I agree with you. It's happening more and more frequently, right? Again, cybersecurity attacks are coming from every angle, and folks are well enough aware that there's a wealth of information on LinkedIn or other platforms where individuals are putting themselves out there. And they're smart enough to be able to put themselves in situations to get connected, to be able to get more information. So we all need to be alert as individuals within this community to protect ourselves. So yeah, all great points, Justen.
Yeah, hyper vigilance.
Yes.
Yeah. So you actually bring up something that I think about quite a bit, which is, we've all seen profiles and resumes that are out there on the internet where they mention like their level of clearance. So is that allowable or is that frowned upon? Like what is the posture on that?
Yeah, well, if you ask me, it's frowned upon, right? It's something, and there's some agencies that don't allow you at all. There's certain acronyms that you cannot use from some of our intelligence agencies, and if they see it on your resume out there, you will get your hand slapped, right? So that's something that's definitely monitored within some of our intelligence agencies and more specific programs. But I would say again, if you ask me, well, it may not be out there in any directive that you can't list that you have a top secret clearance or even top secret SCI. You're just opening yourself up for more risk, for more potential folks contacting you as an adversary, trying to get more information. So, I'm on the front where just put enough information to get a recruiter to bite, and then you can have the conversation and provide some more.
So from your perspective, what would be some ways, like if someone was, hey, I do kind of want to maybe passively be engaged. I'm not, so I do want to send some kind of alert signal, but I don't want to send an alert signal that's going to jeopardize our national security. What would, in your opinion, what would be some ways that people could do that in a way that is both their mission, but also kind of sends that, that message a little bit like, hey, I'm available. What would that look like, you think?
From a clearance perspective, stating you have an active in scope security clearance granted by a government organization, those are key words that's saying that you're doing something right now using that. When you're saying it's active, and if you write your resume to show that you're currently using it in that position, so things like actively working in a secure environment, working out at a government location, those all connect the dots, right? So if you're stating you have some sort of clearance, if you're stating you're doing that, then, through the reasoning, you can say, gosh, this individual is out there doing something right now in the classified world. It seems like a candidate that we want to speak to.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin. Go. Yeah.
So we're talking about resumes, and so there's some
or profiles or bios.
Yeah, because resumes, we're talking clearance jobs, whatever, right? Okay, but delineating that to social media platform and then just
I meant all of the above. Yeah.
Okay. Disclosing of clearances, because I can go on LinkedIn right now and find thousands.
Yeah.
That disclose their clearance.
Yeah.
But not even just that. Like I can also go and find websites of. I can go on to people who've created their own websites, their own branded websites, where they mention. Oh yeah, so. It doesn't matter what domain. They're out there. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I know of people who support the government, and they have expressly told me that they were told that you're not supposed to actually be telling people that you're cleared. And so I always found it interesting. Before I got into the industry, I was like, well, how am I going to find these people? And, a mentor at the time was like, they tell you. And if they don't tell you, you can infer. So it's fine. And then when I got in, I saw how many people actually tell you. And then I would communicate with, like I said, a family member who supports the government. And they were like, they do what? So I always wondered, what the thought process on that was. So.
Yeah, so just 2 points on that. So one, when it comes to a company perspective, there's actually a NISPOM clause in there that states we cannot use our facility clearance level for advertising purposes. So organizations cannot advertise that they have an FCL, therefore they can hire cleared individuals. That is something that cannot be put on company websites, and that is an inspectable item per DCSA. So when it comes to an organization, there is that straightforward guidance. I think individuals who come from government positions, who have been in government positions, they go through an extensive debrief and process when they're leaving and transferring out to understand what they can and cannot say for the rest of their lives. Some of them have cool-off periods. Some of them had things they can never disclose. They go through pre-publication review of any documents, papers, resumes, things that they want to use. So for those folks, it is shocking to see that some of us who have been in industry our whole lives may not have that enough of an understanding to say, wait, maybe I should pause before I put this information out there, right? But government folks definitely get that forced down them before they leave to understand really how to protect themselves going forward and what the government agency that cleared them expects of them to.
Yeah, that's great. And then something that I wanted to kind of cover during our time today, just because I've seen it brought up so many times, and is what is. So there's suitability and the background investigations for those, and then there's like clearances. Can you kind of clear up like what is the differences between those, and like what are the requirements and what are the impacts, because I do think sometimes in the industry there is a little miscommunication on what's an actual clearance versus what is a suitability investigation. And so I just thought that maybe if you can kind of touch on that, that would be impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. So suitability is your lower tier investigations, and then clearances are your higher tiered investigations. So a while back, there was a lot of acronyms being used for the investigation types. There was lack of consistency. We've grown a long way. Now we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5 investigations. And you see that consistency used across suitability and clearance processing. Really, suitability is this. So they are for positions of low risk, moderate risk, or high risk, and the investigation level ties with those levels of risk. There is some overlap with the moderate and high risk to the clearances when it comes to the type of investigation being done. The forms are different. For suitability, you use an SF-85. For clearances, you use an SF-86. With that said, there's currently out for public comment a one-for-all vetting form that's going to maybe, if it goes through, eventually replace the 85 and 86. So that's future talk. So right now, that's the difference. The other part is with suitability, us as FSOs and your company's security officers, we do not initiate those investigations. Those are initiated by the government point of contact for that particular agency. Our role is to facilitate providing documentation to initiate that investigation. When it comes to clearances, on the other hand, we can initiate those investigations. We are the ones who manage that process with fingerprints, with initiating the investigation, reviewing it, and submitting it over to the appropriate agency for processing. So we have a more active role and more visibility when it comes to clearances. So going back to kind of where there is some overlap, a secret clearance and a high-risk public trust go through a very similar type background investigation, if not almost the same. The difference is what they are adjudicated for. So some are adjudicated for that suitability and position of trust. Others are adjudicated against the standards for the access to classified information. Where this really becomes helpful, I think, to recruiters is if you have, say, a secret cleared position that you're looking for, and you find some folks that may have a moderate risk public trust and an investigation on file. Their processing will most likely go faster because they already have that tiered investigation on file that will have some of the things already completed. So that's where kind of that overlap comes into play when you're looking at candidates, that if they have those lower level tiered investigations, it doesn't mean nothing to us if we're going to put them in a clear position. It actually means that we have a previous investigation that we can reference and build off of as they go through the clearance process. That answer your question, Junius?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good
I'm
one.
going to have to drop off a little bit early. Thank you so much, Sarah. You are amazing. And I look forward to seeing the rest of this. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Anytime, Jen. Thanks for hopping on.
Have a good weekend.
All right. To you, Justin. You got any? I think you had the next question, right?
Yeah. I was thinking when we're looking at, candidates and we're dealing with, expats and OCONUS, how do the impacts of, maybe OCONUS deployments play and maybe they don't, but I'm just curious, especially as it applies to, OCONUS staff, because, I've done a lot of that, and looking for those staff or looking for folks that will deploy, right? So I'm just curious about that. And I'm talking like F&A and other,
Are you talking about candidates who've lived or worked abroad?
Yeah, and then like obviously there's going to be F&A.
Yeah.
Just by default, right? So I'm just curious about that.
Foreign nationals, got it.
Yeah. Sorry.
So are you talking about, what they would experience if they're going to go through the clearance process from scratch, or if they already have a clearance and they want to maintain it, or kind of mobility between agencies, just so I can.
Yeah. All of the above, right?
Okay.
All of the above. You're based, let's say, in a specific country, and let's say it's an allied country, NATO, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
But now you've maybe had some FNA, and then it's, like, how does that impact things? And then also, like, what does the mobility look like for that individual?
Yeah, so it's all really, if you're going to work, and one of my companies that I worked for, we had folks in all the co-coms, across the board. So that was a constant conversation that I was having with folks. Okay, I'm here now. I'm going out to dinner. I met someone. What do I do? Right. And I think it's just understanding your responsibility as an already cleared individual of what you need to maintain and document, and really converse with your security officer about. One thing I emphasize to our employees is security is not here just to tell you no. We are here to help you, obtain and maintain that clearance. We want to bring in talent to our organization. We want to keep that talent around. And part of our job for that is really letting them know what's expected of them. So my advice to already cleared individuals going to these locations and potentially having foreign contacts, lots of foreign travel, document. So if you go out to the SEAD 3, the Security Executive Agent Directive 3 and 4, you'll find all the information as to what are your reporting responsibilities and what's the adjudication criteria. Read it, understand it, ask questions, and go along with it. If you are not cleared, but you had a background where you had a lot of travel, you have a lot of foreign contacts, but you want to go through the clearance process, it's the same thing. Really understand what's going to be required of you from that documentation perspective, and reevaluate your close and continuous contact with your foreign nationals. Is this someone you're going to continue contact with? Well, then you're going to have to put it on your form. If this is someone you just met in passing and you're not going to contact them anymore, well, then reevaluate that to ensure you're meeting the reporting criteria. With all that said, we do have some agencies out there that if you have not lived continuous in the United States for the past either 3 to 5 years, you will not make it through their clearance process. They want that continuous living here in the United States, and that's particular to certain agencies. So again, just if you're navigating new through the world, understand which agencies those are, and being able to be prepared for what that process looks like and the time frame you may have to wait until you can apply.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of something about.
I was thinking, no.
Yeah, I was thinking about. Are there special requirements for maintaining high levels of security clearances, like that? Maybe people need to be mindful of. Like, are there any like special things that could impact their capability to obtain those high levels of clearance?
Yeah, so to being able to obtain, absolutely. Going back to the adjudicative criteria, foreign contact, foreign travel, allegiance to the United States, your credit is huge, past drug use, any past criminal activity, all of those things come into play. Now, with that said, if you once, smoked marijuana back in high school, but you haven't done it again since, what the government's going to look at is that whole person concept, the time frame in which it was done, the frequency in which something might have occurred, and if that potentially is a risk that you cannot protect classified information. So it is looked at. So don't leave things off your form either. That is a big no-no. So I have had folks that did not disclose that they had drug use in high school or college, then later disclosed it because they upgraded their clearance, and that became a huge issue, and they wound up losing their eligibility because they were not forthcoming and did not provide honest information on a previous government form. So always disclose that. I think, the other thing, Junius, for folks who already have that high level clearance to maintain it is really understand what's expected of you. I can't really emphasize that enough. I've maintained mine for 19 years, and really, I know that if I'm going to a dinner party and there's folks there, okay, I'm going to come home and I'm going to tell my team that I met a new foreign contact because they were here tonight, and there's that information. I know when to do my foreign travel reporting. I know not to buy CBD with certain hemp. I don't even buy CBD, but that I don't even, have it in my household because still marijuana is federally illegal. Like all those things, you have to understand that if you want to maintain this, what your parameters are for reporting and your lifestyle going forward.
Justin, I think you had a question that you wanted to hop in.
Yeah, I mean,
I got
my
a couple
question
follow-ups as well.
Yeah, I mean, just as it applies to like a spouse, if they, I think there obviously we see that happen, especially in DoD sometimes, and like what is that process? And obviously there can be different levels based on that, where they're from, right? So yeah, I'm just curious about that.
No, so if you have a spouse that's not a U.S. citizen, then you do have a reporting responsibility there. So prior to marriage, you need to submit documentation to the government agency that holds your clearance to have them process the documentation. It's called an intent to marry form. Most of the time, that's the consistent name across the agencies, but you're providing information about your spouse, about your future family. So, any mitigation can be processed. There's also the ongoing responsibility to continue to report information after that. If you get to know more family members that you haven't reported, you've got to bring that information. Same as if you're adopting a child that's from a foreign country. There's procedures for that as well. So it goes back to just if you have a change in lifestyle that could potentially put you in a different situation, talk to your security team. Talk to anybody in your company and say, who would have my answers for me on this? I think, when it comes to not spouses that aren't foreign nationals, we really don't have much of a reporting responsibility unless we are being put in a situation that falls under our adjudicating criteria. So, for example, if you are witness to an incident, right, to let's just say a domestic violence, if you are a witness to that but not involved in that, you need to report that you were maybe cited in a police report, right? Or cited in certain documentation to protect yourself from any further investigation that could go on, because now you're tied to that legally in legal documentation. So those are the type things that if you don't have a foreign spouse, that if you're involved in, that you would have to engage with your security team. But the other thing too is, if you're living in a house where your spouse is doing lots of things that open you up for risk, put your job, a lot of us work from home now, put your job at risk, well, then those are things that you would want to ask yourself as a cleared individual in that situation. Am I making a good decision right now, right? Yeah. It's nothing that we can force yes or no, but you would hope that you would click, okay, I don't really want to put myself in this spot because I could potentially have an unauthorized disclosure. There could be something that happened in my, all those things could come into play. So just be smart about it, I guess.
Yeah, that makes me think about like incidents.
Yep.
I was going to say it could be F&A, not through you, but you may be the target, but indirectly through spouse or domestic partner or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if that's the case, it's if you are going to have close and continuous contact, and typically if it's your spouse who's going to have that close and continuous contact and you may be just in passing, it's better safe than sorry to document it, right? Because you don't know what your spouse or domestic partner might be sharing about you. So you want to ensure that you protect yourself on record and get it documented.
And I just to follow up on that, Junius, one real quick. I have seen now where recruiters are being connected with because we're within orbit of cleared individuals. And so we need to be hyper vigilant ourselves in who we're connecting with. And I've seen where we've had to let, folks know, hey, these individuals are connecting with you, even, they could be working unclassified, but because they're within the orbit. So we need to be hyper vigilant as talent acquisition professionals as well. Similar to what Sarah is saying. So there's food for thought.
Yeah, I guess my question was more around what are, we hear about like incidents, like incident reports, right? That could impact. What are some of the things that, you've kind of, obviously you can't get into specifics, but what are some of maybe like the general, incidents that could impact someone's ability to remain cleared after they've been granted a clearance? Something that comes to mind is if they get cited for like a criminal charge, like a DUI or domestic assault, or, from your perspective, what are some things that you have seen that have impacted people's clearances, whether it's secret level all the way up to, any, FSPs or whatever?
Yeah, great question. It brings us into the topic of continuous vetting, right? So, years and years ago, we were not investigated until our every 5-year mark or 10-year mark or 15-year mark, depending on our level. And that's when information would then arise and be adjudicated, and something could pop up where you would have a delay maybe in regaining your access. With continuous vetting, it's real time now. So if we are delinquent on our credit, there will be an alert in a system that's going to go, and it could come back to you that you have to respond to what's called an RFI, a request for information. And that comes through the FSO security team. And then you have to tell the government, one, did you self-report it? So if you self-reported it and it's already on file with your security team, that bodes well for you, because that is one of our requirements as cleared individuals, self-reporting. I can't emphasize that enough, because that is how you maintain your clearance. If you wait until you get that RFI, then it's worse to kind of get through the process. Credit is a huge one, Junius, that we see a lot of recently. Folks, either delinquent payments, garnishments, wage garnishments is another one. So those are the more frequent. I'd say the other part that we see a lot more is what you had mentioned. So if you're involved in criminal activity or something like that, that you didn't report, DUIs, that is a frequent one that we receive as well. So those are some of the things to be mindful of as we're in the world of continuous vetting, that it's not waiting 5 years from now. You've got to worry about things now. So if you have a 30-day late payment, call your security team, tell them your plan. If you owe on your taxes, it's tax season, right? And you're going to have to go on a payment plan. Those are the things that you want to engage with your security team so you can maintain that clearance. The higher level the clearance, the more timely it is, the more important it is to be timely on that reporting, because you're going to have to get that information in, and they're going to want to understand what is the risk profile surrounding, the incident at hand or the adverse information at hand.
And so is there a difference between the level of clearance with how frequently those clearances need to be renewed? Is there a difference between secret or top secret or higher
Not
levels
anymore.
of policy? Okay.
Not anymore. It's all every 5 years. We have to submit a new SF-86. So no matter what your level is, you have to submit it. Everyone is mandated to be enrolled in continuous vetting. So we are all in it now, or should be all in continuous vetting. If you're not, you may sometimes hear that from us, Junius, internally. Well, they're not in CE or CV, so we've got to enroll them so they're compliant. Then that's submitting it. And then at that 5-year mark, we have to do that again. The reason for that timer is just to get that updated form in.
And that's continuous vetting as long as it's been active within the past 24 months. Is that correct? Okay. So if someone has a clearance, they're in continuous vetting, but for some reason, they left a role where it was active and they've gone outside of that 24-month period, is it accurate that clearance is no longer active, and it would almost be like they would be starting all over again? Is that correct?
Right. That is correct.
Okay. Yep. I think that's important, because I know sometimes, and I'm sure, Justin, you've had this where someone's like, "Oh, I have a clearance," and you're like, "Yes, you had a clearance." They're like, "No, I have a clearance." Have you had your clearance active in the past 24 months? No, I haven't used it in 3 years. You don't have a clearance anymore. So
I think it's you get into that gray area where they know and they're reaching.
Like, oh no, it's good for 10 years. Oh, it's good for 5. Well, it's good for 5 as long as you're using it continuously. If you stop for a period of 2 years, it's no longer active. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, and who better than a security expert. So something that I think comes up quite a bit too is you hire someone, and like there's this thing between, okay, I have someone that's in, the contract is Intel or the contract is DoD, but their clearance is held by the Intel agency. It's like held by like the opposite. And there seems to be like a huge hesitancy or like a huge bottleneck with being able to get, like, even though they're cleared, but it's like the two systems don't talk to each other. So what is really the truth behind that? Because, we've all had hiring managers that were like, oh, well, if they're over in Intel, we can't consider them. And you're like, is that accurate? Or so can you kind of give us maybe some understanding of what are things that are accurate about things that could prohibit crossover, or if there's some misnomers out there that maybe are, not accurate?
Sure, absolutely. So system of record is really key in the conversation as to what your agency's system of record is for clearances. Within DoD, it's easy. Right now, our system of record is DIS, but we're transitioning over to NBIS. So right now as FSOs, we actually have to maintain both systems for our personnel. So DIS is what we use. Scattered Castles is the repository of clearance information for the intelligence community. It is not necessarily a system in which you manage clearances in, but it's a repository in which information flows into. Previously, DCSA and access to that system took forever. There wasn't a quick turnaround where if we submitted what's called a customer service request, or it used to be called an RRU, request for recertify and upgrade. If we submitted that previously, it could have taken months. Now, good news is we see it turn around sometime as quick as 24 hours, but most of the time we tell our recruiting team, so they don't say within 24 hours, where's the answer, Sarah? About a week or a week and a half. Now, so that's great news, right? We're seeing progress in that information sharing across our agencies. Some of the things that can come into play that even though we can get the information maybe moved from one system to another, there's areas that we still have to validate. One of those being continuous vetting. DoD has to have everybody in continuous vetting, and the reciprocity from other agencies' continuous vetting program is not always accepted. There was previously different versions of Trusted Workforce 2.0 within agencies, so it didn't cross over. So sometimes if we have someone coming from an intel agency, we got them successfully moved into DIS, we still have to take that action to enroll them in continuous vetting to meet that regulation. So that's one of them. The other is if you're going from, DOD to Intel and you have a lot of foreign contacts, you've had a lot of foreign travel, some agencies, we'll say some of the 3-letter ones, they're going to want to look at that a little bit further, and their reciprocity may take a little bit longer because of that. So those are some of the elements to kind of keep in mind, that if you're moving across, it isn't impossible, but it's not always as straightforward as let me submit the CSR and then we're good to go.
So what I think about it from a leadership standpoint is I would probably say to recruiters that the best thing for them to do would be to connect with their security professional who can provide them kind of not necessarily with a definitive time frame, but can provide them based on what they're seeing, what like in kind of not even an estimate, but like kind of like a guide or at least a starting point of what they are expecting based on what they're seeing in the system. Is that what you would recommend? Or
Absolutely. And that's a practice that I've tried to do throughout my whole career. Is if you win new work, right, you sit down with the recruiting team and say, okay, here's what the security looks like for that. Here's what we need and what system and what the expectations are. But if you get candidates from here, and here, don't just, throw them out the window. They're not acceptable. Just understand that this is what we're going to have to do. And really that conversation up front is what helps us be successful in that partnership. So yeah, I always recommend reach out to your security team, because hiring managers will tell you one thing sometimes, but they don't always understand the intricacies of what we can potentially accomplish in security to get folks moved over.
So Justen, on your end, I know, did you have a question? I thought you were going to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I had a question, but you can edit it out if we need to. Okay. All right. TikTok.
Go ahead, man.
TikTok. Yes. No.
Oh, no. TikTok.
Maybe.
No.
No. And no. Yeah. So yes. No.
It's a no.
And I want to be clear. Sarah and I are aligned. But
Yes.
Junius. So anyway,
What?
you can
No. There was a directive that went out that if, as a matter of fact, even in my organization, they sent out that if you're supporting an agency, that you're, as a contractor, you're not allowed to have it on a work device.
Yes, there was a DFARS clause that was released that ByLite products are prohibited on devices that are used that store federal contract information. So if you use your personal phone for work, you can't access TikTok.
Yep, that's
so
right.
I've never been a fan of TikTok. I've never actually used it. So I was excited to see that they are taking steps to protect us in that way with the information that's put out there and available to our adversaries. Yep. However, with that said, social media is is good for some things, right? I know that a lot of recruiters may use it for recruiting in candidates, putting out stuff to get people's attentions. Well, I think that that's a great avenue. You have to just be careful with the conversation you're putting out there and the information you're sharing there. And just don't use your company issued device that houses the information. So, just be smart about it. So while I am right there with you, there are healthy ways to use social media to promote not only recruiting activities, but what we do.
And to be clear, I will still watch TikTok stuff with my kids, so I'm not, but
I think one step further, my kids aren't allowed to have it because the government said that I couldn't have it, so they don't even get it.
Yeah,
See,
there is real. It's not that anyway. That's not a shameless plug, but I'm just saying.
That's right. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Real does not, because it's U.S. based, does not have the implications. But anyway, I digress.
So one thing that you kind of brought up, your interaction with the recruiting teams. How do you ensure that the recruiting teams are up to date with the latest security protocols and clearance requirements? Like what are some of the resources that you use? Obviously, I'm sure you have, mandated ones that come through official channels, but are there some like unofficial channels for like professional development that you would recommend? Like if people are like passionate about like wanting to learn about, security in the cleared sector and staying, abreast of all of the latest and greatest in terms of like regulations that could impact the industry and how it can impact recruiting. What are your recommendations for that?
Great question. So I'm a member of NCMS, the National Classification Management Society. I'm a member of ISWIG, the Industrial Security Working Group Society. I'm a member of InfraGard. I involve myself in Impact, INSA, all of the kind of the groups that are out there, and I attend them and I listen and I bring that information back to my organization, to all the stakeholders that it pertains to. I find that very important. I'm in the NCMS portal and in the InfraGard portal daily, seeing what alerts are being put out, what I can share, what is beneficial to the company. One I would say that they have publicly broadcasted meetings is the NISPAC. So the NISPAC, I think, meets quarterly. And what it does is it brings all of the groups within the government, the working groups that are focusing on changes, on updates to our federal regulations for conversation as to where we are, what's being stated, what are the comments. And it's a great call to dial into. It's usually 4 hours. And you dial in and listen to see what's coming down the pipeline. What are the hot topics? What are some of the changes we can expect? That is a great resource of information. But I would say if recruiting professionals want to know more, want to be able to have access to training and learning, NCMS is great. They put on a great conference every year. Like I said, they have a website and a portal you can log into. Really great resource and great for networking within our community, and it continues to evolve. So I couldn't recommend that more. I've been a member for my entire career.
Awesome. No, that's really helpful. I think that's good stuff. And I know that security in the clear space is it's and recruiting really our partners, strategic partners in a lot of different ways. From understanding contract language, making sure that we get that accurate, and also just getting working through that partnership to make sure that what we put out there is accurate, and that we're using the right verbiage to describe what the requirements are. They all have an impact in talent acquisition, especially because we're dealing with a finite pool of individuals, and we don't do ourselves any favors by inaccurately communicating the wrong clearance levels or requirements that are not the true requirements. It's just going to make our jobs harder in talent acquisition to find people. So I enjoy partnering with the security arm of government contracting to really understand that lens of it, and then also working through those channels. And I know for me, it's been really helpful in my career to reduce, additional churn when, maybe you have a hiring manager who has a different understanding of the security requirements, right? and you can leverage that relationship with security to who are the subject matter experts. And I would encourage anyone in TA that security should be your best friend, because they can help you in so many ways. They can help you with understanding verbiage in the contract that you could then use to infer to help you find people. They can help you with understanding what the requirements are, so that way you can explain the process to the hiring team to make sure that they don't disqualify people who could be potential good candidates. I mean, there's a lot of down the stream impacts that can happen if you don't properly leverage security. So that's my State of the Union message there. Sarah, from my perspective, really want to thank you so much for taking time to come and be a guest on our GovCon Heroes, Talent Unleashed podcast today. And I'm going to turn it over to you. I wasn't going to forget. I wasn't going to close out. Trust me. So with that being said, Justen, it's your go. You got it.
This is my last one, but it's a big one. There's supply chain security is a major concern right now, as I'm sure you're familiar with that, Sarah. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious of what, I'm just talking security in general's posture is on supply chain as it applies to integrators like ours, using outsourced talent acquisition services that may be non-U.S. entities or not based in the U.S., meaning they're outsourcing services that Junius or I may do as Americans to non-U.S. persons to do cleared recruiting within our industry. Curious of the supply chain ramifications of that and the security implications of that as it applies to other integrators doing this work that do that. And I know of some that do it.
Great question. So supply chain is a hot topic within the security industry right now, not only from the DCSA perspective, but if we go back and look at the NIST controls, if you look at the 853 framework, the Rev 5, the supply chain that's coming down with that, there is a lot that we as federal contractors are being asked to be cognizant of, to be responsible for, to report, right? So if we are leveraging organizations and bringing in suppliers into our organizations, we have to understand that security risk and what's required to report that. So if you ask my perspective and personally mine, I think that's something that we need to really take a look at, right? It opens a lot of risk if we start sharing that federal contract information that falls under certain controls, potentially sensitive information. You open yourself up for so many different risks as an organization by sharing that, because the goal is in recruiting is to give that team as much information to go find the right people, right? So your job rec posting doesn't have it all there. It's going to your brain trusts that are looking for those folks. It's going to you guys. How can we share the appropriate information to folks that really shouldn't have access to it, that bring risk into what we're doing as a federal organization? So that's kind of my point of view on it. Really be aware of it and understand what you're opening yourself up for if that's something you choose to leverage as an organization.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be inquisitive. I'd be curious if security doesn't start looking at those suppliers and the information provided by other integrators where they may, in fact, leverage non-U.S. persons or non-U.S. entities to do recruiting within this industry, and how there may be risk involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a topic. I would 100% involve myself in that. In any organization that I was with, it would be something that I would want to understand fully, disclose with my DCSA rep, make sure that they understand. I mean, if that's the path forward. Sometimes you can't stop choices of businesses, but you want to understand that risk and being able to be responsible for your program. So that's something I would 100% be involved in.
I promise that's my last one, Junius.
No, it was a great question. I'm glad that you brought it up. So phenomenal question and phenomenal response by you, Sarah. And folks, that does it for today's episode of GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed. I really want to thank Sarah Stull again, Senior Director of Security at Maximus, for joining us today to really talk about all the different things that we need to consider in the cleared space and talent acquisition and how it relates to security clearances and the impacts of that particular segment of our industry, how it intertwines with talent acquisition. So really want to thank you, Sarah, again for your time. And for those, you can find this episode on our YouTube channel, GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed, as well as our Spotify channel, GovCon Heroes Talent Unleashed as well. So this episode will be out over the next few days, and we hope you will join our YouTube channel. Click on the like button and subscribe for future videos and content.
Thank you both. Great questions, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.